So let's continue with today's class. Cultivating the attitude of being joyful when suffering arises. Maybe sickness, it could be wealth, it could be maybe a divorce, it could be a layoff. Any kind of this unfortunate events, you can view them as the best favorable conditions, the best companions on the path of practice, and then generate joyfulness. Just as it is stated in Bodhisattva Charyavatara, the wise ones going through different kinds of suffering will not disturb the clear mind. Not only that their mind will not be disturbed, their mind would be ever clear. Their mind will become ever more bright and clear. But for the not-so-wise ones, for the fools, just as Mipo Rinpoche stated that whenever and whatever suffering they encounter, not only they will not receive any benefits or value, they will in fact spend days without paying attention or trying to learn from their experiences. But for the wise ones, they're not like that at all. When they encounter happy moments, they won't get arrogant. They will turn happiness onto a path of enlightenment. And when they encounter suffering, they will learn more from that, and they will make such suffering into their companions, and therefore give rise to joyfulness. So seeing suffering as an eye-line to help us on the path, we must learn to develop a sense of joy when it arises. Yet whenever suffering strikes, unless we have some kinds of spiritual practice to bring to it, one which matches to the capacity of our mind, no matter how many times we might say to ourselves, well, as long as I've got roughly the right method, I will be able to use suffering and obtain such and such as a benefit, is highly unlikely that it will succeed, will be as far from our goal as saying goes as the earth is from the sky. It means that as a wise one, then they can transform suffering into enlightenment and transform whatever on the path into favorable conditions. But for us, we're not like that at all. We cannot transform these. When we're happy, we cannot practice. When we're anxious, we can't practice. When can we practice? There's really no time to practice anymore. We would say that it's raining outside. It's bad weather. I don't feel well. It's too hot. My mouth is dry. I'm so thirsty. I'm not feeling comfortable. It's too sunny. It's too rainy. Other than the weather, it's the health. So really, there is no way for you to practice anymore. If you're happy, you cannot practice. If you cannot practice when it's suffering, there's really no opportunity for you to practice ever. Therefore, what you should familiarize yourself is, it is wonderful to practice when I'm happy. It is wonderful to practice when I'm upset. There are people who's giving different excuses, such as I'm in bad mood, I can't practice, and then they say like I'm not in a good health condition, I will practice after when I'm healthy. So day after day, how long would you live? Good practitioners don't do that. Good practitioners don't procrastinate. Even if they're going through suffering, even if they're not feeling well, they would use the time to practice. So over here, it says that we should turn the suffering into the path of enlightenment, and we should very much find a practice that goes with our mind. Otherwise, transform suffering into the path is really just very vague. It's a concept. Just like when we say that I'm going to liberate all sentient beings, your eyes are wide open and speaking very clearly. But whenever someone with a bad temper stands in front of you, you cannot handle them. That is to say, then in such a way, how can you liberate all sentient beings? All sentient beings is a very vague concept to you as well. Similarly, you really have to have one practice that you can actually use when you're suffering. It's just like when you're ill, you have a medicine. You have to use a medicine right away. If you only know the different terms of medicine, I have to eat medicine. I have to use the good medicine, Tibetan medicine, Chinese medicine, African medicine, Egyptian medicine. Whatever you say is not going to help your illness. Similarly, to transform happiness and suffering, if you do not actually transform, if you do not actually practice such transformation, then it doesn't matter how long you stayed in certain monastery or certain university or centers. It doesn't make any difference. I read lots of introductions from different people. So and so practiced in retreat for 20, 30 years. And right away I would think, has he actually practiced all of those teachings? Has he studied in so and so college and so Buddhist academies? Well, without actually practice on it, then even if you spend your whole life, even if you write all the number of years on your resume, it doesn't make a difference. If you only come to this place as a place to take refuge from a great rain, it doesn't make any difference to your mind stream. It's easy to say we can use the skillful means and transform suffering into practice. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have suffering? It has so much merit and so much benefit. It doesn't matter how much you talk about it. You can talk as much as you want, but if you do not put it into your action, you do not infuse it with your mind, then your actual practice or actual life is like sky and earth to the actual meaning of this teaching. It doesn't really make any difference in your life. Therefore, we should practice again and again. We cannot only we have to practice again and again. It really depends if you can constantly remember this teaching again and again. If you can, then it is very meaningful. Without it, then it's very difficult to reach the goal. The goal is to merge yourself with the Dharma, merge your mind with the Dharma. Whenever suffering happens, you're actually genuinely happy to accept it. Many people can't do it, and the reason is that you're not practicing it. Therefore, whatever practice that we study, whatever we adapt into our daily practice, then it has to be something that is very suitable to you. For some people, I think practicing renunciation helps. Whenever suffering occurs, they would practice renunciation. For some, it is to practice taking refuge. For some, to practice prostration, and because it would destroy their arrogance. For some, it would be repent or confession, and for some, it would be practicing Tonglen, and for some is to read the teacher's teachings, and they will gain more confidence. I myself, every time when I encounter suffering, I really feel that the teaching of impermanence really helps. whenever suffering happens, whenever suffering occurs, the first thought comes to me is that it is the impermanence that Buddha had taught. Everything is impermanent. My health declined when my health declined, suffering quite a bit from that, or when things doesn't happen the way I wish to, then I would say, well, it is indeed what the Buddha said, that everything is impermanent. So in such a way, I personally adopt such practice. In my life, I really think that to transform suffering into the path is really the best method. And maybe because I feel more strongly about impermanence, and therefore I adopted this particular practice. When I was young, I didn't really practice, I didn't really receive a systematic Buddhist education. I only had faith. I didn't have systematic theoretical teaching. But my understanding of impermanence is rather very strong. I see the corpse of yaks and I would think, wow, this is so impermanent. All of these yaks used to live, and I used to like those yaks quite a bit. And when I go to the charnel ground, I have the strong feeling of impermanence. When I then look at the different relationships, the changes of relationships, I think in such a way as well. When I hear how people are revered, and when I hear how people are really wealthy, I would also contemplate up on impermanence. I think this is because of my habitual tendencies or my karmic tendencies, and therefore I practice on impermanence. So whenever suffering occurs, though I have this understanding of impermanence, I don't give up everything because of impermanence. Rather, I treat whatever I have to do with great care and with lots of effort. I think many people really want to take a picture of me with my earrings. Unfortunately, you can't really take a photo right now. I'm sure you really want to, though. So this part is really important. I'm sure everyone really want to learn how to transform suffering into practice. But you have to familiarize yourself into it. Without practicing on familiarization, it's not possible to use it when you need it. When suffering occurs, you would probably lose all your control, and you're probably going to be dragged by the suffering. Don't even mention about turning suffering into the path of enlightenment, or have the attitude of being joyful. It is really a far-fetched. So you have to practice it. Practice impermanence, practice renunciation, practice bodhicitta, so that you can use it whenever you need to. Just as lots of soldiers, they would go through many years of training. And then, after many years of training, whenever they meet the enemy, the first reaction they have is to take up their weapon. that becomes their first reaction, their natural reaction. Similarly, whenever we practice on a daily basis, and very often we practice upon impermanence, bodhicitta, and renunciation, and so on, if you practice in depth, and then the first thing that occurs to you when suffering occurs is that, oh, everything is impermanence, there is nothing to grasp onto.